Oh, hello there. Wherever you're listening, however you're listening, over on the Reality After Show YouTube channel, or joining me on my very own Twitter page at Gabe Ortiz. Thank you so much for choosing to spend even just a little bit of your night here at Gabe's Big Move. Excited to be back. A little bit of a hiatus, doing some other shows on some other networks, but happy to be back now. Hopefully, going to get back on the Tuesday schedule. Had to go Wednesday tonight because we have a brand new show. Yes, a brand new show coming to the Reality After Show Network. I think it's going to be something a little different, something that you might not expect coming up immediately following Gabe's big move. So be sure to stay tuned. Johnny is going to be a part of it alongside producer Bobby Goodsby. So really, really excited to get into that in just a bit. But right now, want to get into the topic, to the theme for tonight's episode of Gabe's Big Move. It's all about juries and the way that they've changed, the way that they've shifted over the long history of Survivor. And I think some of these will be pretty obvious to people. I think some of them we can dig a little bit deeper into and figure out what's really going on here. So I want to start out first with something pretty basic, right? I mean, if we're going to tackle this whole concept of juries and what exactly a jury and a juror is, I mean, we have to first start at the beginning, right? So let's talk about it. What is a juror? Now, most people know it's somebody that makes it past a certain threshold in the game, after the merge at least, and then stays for the rest of the production and eventually goes on to cast their vote for who they think deserves the title of sole survivor and $1 million. Now, this is such a unique position to find yourself in for a couple reasons. Namely, because you're still a part of the game. And there is this notion of house money that comes with that. I mean, I can tell you from my perspective, when I crossed the threshold into being a juror, I mean, like the relief, the weight that just rolled off my shoulders after that Tiana vote, when I knew that no matter what, I wasn't getting on that early plane home. I was going to be hanging out at Ponderosa with all my friends for at least another 8, 9 days. Knowing that I was going to be hanging out with all my friends at Ponderosa for at least another 8 or 9 days. I mean, like, it was just this feeling, and I was going to get to be a part of the reunion show as well. It was just this feeling of like, okay, I'm going to get to do everything, right? I will now get to do everything. I will be at the end of the show. I will be a part of the final tribal council. I will get to speak at final tribal council. I will get to go to Ponderosa. On top of all the things I've already done. I've won team immunities. I found an immunity idol. I won individual immunity. Like all of these things were like, okay, this was the final thing short of winning that I needed to make sure I could do. And once I got past that threshold, house money, baby. I'm a bona fide part of season 47. Not that the people who didn't make the jury aren't a part of season 47, but it's like I'm going to be here for the whole thing. When day 26 rolls around, I will be a part of that. And that feeling was just like, oh my God. Like, okay, like we've made it past probably the biggest milestone in the entire game, right? Like if you want to look at the big milestones you hit over the course of a Survivor season, like don't be the first person out. Make it to the merge. Make the jury. And then after that, it's like the only place left to go is final tribal council and go win the damn thing. There are no more real milestones after that, right? I mean, you can say like Final Five, Final Four, Fire Make, like whatever, but let's be honest, like those are all pretty arbitrary milestones that people and fans put down for themselves. But true, tangible milestones that I'm talking about here, the jury is the last one to hit, short of winning. And so once you hit that point, it's like just you can kind of roll your shoulders back and be like, okay, like I did it. I hit it. I got to where I wanted to go. Now let's just go try and ride this thing to the end and see if we have the skill and the luck to actually go win this thing. Obviously, we know how that story ended for me. And so that's who's making up this group of people that eventually go decide the winner. It's this group of folks that have all hit that milestone in one way or another. But something that comes with that milestone is the belief that you can, and in most cases will go win the entire thing. And so that's kind of the 2 sides of this coin. Sorry for the double audio there. So that's kind of the 2 sides of this coin here, right? Is that one side, it's like this relief of like, "Oh my god, I'm gonna be a part of the jury. I'm gonna be here till the end. I'll have a say in how all this shakes out. If I don't go out and win, I'm gonna get to go party at Ponderosa, and it'll be a fun time at Ponderosa. It won't be a funeral for everybody that comes back. This is huge." But then also it's like, okay, I clearly have done some things along the way to make it to this point that mean I'm in the running to go all the way. And our jury was comprised of how many people off the top of my head? Sierra, Saul, me, Kyle, Caroline, Genevieve, Teeny. 7. I think that was everyone, right? Apologies if I'm oh, and Andy, of course. Baby Andy, how could I forget? So 8 people. So it's like, okay, I made it to the top 11. Clearly something is working here that's gotten me to this point in the game. Not only did I survive the pre-jury phase, but I've also survived 2 votes where everybody was on the island. At least on the same island. Like, okay, something is working here. So you have a lot of people that go forward being a juror with oftentimes very mixed emotions. And whether they break positively or negatively is a case by case basis, right? Like for me, as I'm sure you can probably surmise from a lot of what I'm saying right now, it was a lot of very positive emotions. Like, I was very happy to be a juror. I was very proud to be a juror. I was very proud of my game. Um, and it was something that like I walked out sad, very sad, very upset. But then once I got back to Ponderosa and once I met up with Saul and Sierra, like I didn't spend a lot of time being sad. And I promise you that's not a lie and that's not cope because I'm sure a lot of people think that when you get voted out, it's just like the most devastating feeling in the entire world. And you just want to sit inside of your room and just pull the curtains down and just, forget you exist and let the ground swallow you up. And for some people, that is exactly true. But for me, I was just had this just overwhelming gratitude for everything. And I think it cleared my head a lot to go forward and make my decision for who I wanted to win in a very, what I believe, objective and fair manner. And, as we all know, I ended up voting for Rachel to win, who did go on to win. Like I no disrespect to my ride or die Sue or my very good homeboy Sam, who I think wins many, many, many seasons of Survivor. But, like, I would vote for Rachel every time in the same position. I just think she deserved to win that season, I really do. Now, would that be the case in years past? So let's kind of go through the evolution of juries and Survivor, the theme of tonight's episode. And when you look at the very early days of Survivor, it was often very emotional. And not that that's devoid from the game, because it's still very much there. I mean, even in the new era seasons, there are very emotional, very bitter juries. But it felt a little more consistent in those early days of Survivor. Very bitter, very emotional, oftentimes rewarding loyalty, punishing betrayal, punishing backstabbing, punishing cutthroat gameplay. And the vote often felt more based around morality than it did around gameplay. Who needs the money more? Who did I just like more? Who didn't end my game? Who lied to me the least, or who didn't lie to me at all? And you've seen that change over the years. And in those early days, it made sense why it was like that, right? No one really understood the gaminess of what they were doing out there. And it was this very pure emotional game of relationships. And everybody interprets and experiences relationships very differently. And it wasn't this like, oh, you were directing votes and you won a lot of challenges and don't worry, I know that you told me you would never vote for me and then you voted for me anyway and stabbed me in the back without me seeing it coming and it broke my heart, but I get why you made that move. Like that didn't exist. I mean, look at Kelly's speech from Borneo. Rats and snakes. And it's like that's was the lens that I think a lot of jurors were looking at their finalists through. Was like, were you my friend? Were you a rat or were you a snake? And if you were my friend, you're going to get my vote no matter what you did in the game. No matter how much of a lame duck you were. No matter how many votes you missed out on. No matter how many times you voted wrong. Like, you were my friend, of course I'm going to vote for you. Or, you know, like I said just a few minutes ago, do you really need the money? Are you a single mom? Are you a young kid who's trying to find his place in the world? Or are you an established, successful, grown adult? If you really need the money and if you can pull at my heartstrings, pretty good chance I'm going to give you that money. But we've seen that change a lot over the course of the history of the show. And I think probably once you get to like that Cook Islands phase of the game, like Cook Islands, probably for a long run to like, I'd say like second chances, which is quite a broad stroke to paint. I understand. But I think that people started to then understand the gaminess of it. I think people then started to be able to contextualize the idea of you outplayed me and I'll vote for you because of that. I don't think that that was a thing in those early seasons of the show. And I think that it took some really heady players like Yule to come in and to really change people's perspective of what it meant to play Survivor, of how you could gamify the entire thing, of how you could treat it almost like an equation and not just this, group of people that are all trying to figure out who's hooking up with who gets along with who hates who's racist, who's sexist, blah, 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 blah. And that's going to dictate how I vote. It kind of became more of this like, okay, out of this game that we're all still figuring out what it is, who is playing the best one? And we see a proto version of that start again, I think in Cook Islands. And I think that that is a very pivotal turning point in the history of the show. We also start to get the open forum juries, like the actual format of how you interact with the game as a juror started to change. And I think that people started to go in to Survivor thinking less about like, oh, I'm going to be everybody's friend and I'm going to do great in the challenges and I'm going to work hard around camp and that's how I'm going to win the game, to like, okay, how can I position myself each round to not only be able to assume a lot of the credit for whoever goes home, but also set myself up for future rounds to push the vote in the direction that I want to see it go. Like that was the beginnings of what we have nowadays. And there are many exceptions to the rule that I'm talking about here. There are many different instances of modern juries, new era juries that are super bitter and super emotional. I can think of a couple off the top of my head that we can get to in just a few minutes here. I can think of old school juries that rewarded gameplay and weren't very emotional and came looking for who played the best game. But this is kind of more generally speaking from a more zoomed out perspective. And then I think you start to get to more modern era Survivor. I think most people would say like the proper modern era of Survivor started around David versus Goliath, and then you have a cut of the new era that broke that off. But I think you start to see people, okay, now it's not just about like who played the best game. Now that's still a major factor, probably the biggest factor, but what it means to play the best game, that definition starts to change. It's not just like who was in control, who was pushing the most votes. Now it's about who had meaningful moves, but also who had the social connections to put themselves in the finale. And I think that people really start to respect big moves in this modern era, but I think that they also they want to be a part of the story too. And I think that's something that became more important as time has gone on. I think that people want to be validated in their game through your game as a finalist. And I'll explain what I mean by that. I think that folks started to look for a lot of validation as a juror. And I think that's where you start to get a lot of the jury management coming in, particularly a lot of the more intentional jury management coming into play. Where it's not just like, hey, man, I think you're great. Hey, heads up, you're leaving tonight. And that stuff still exists. Don't get me wrong. But it's this idea of like, you were very important to me sitting in this seat right now. Or you were such a big threat that had I kept you in the game longer, you would probably be sitting here instead of me. And that sentiment, I think, became more and more important as time went on once you hit like that David versus Goliath era of Survivor. And I think the idea of sending people to the jury, sending people to Ponderosa as advocates for your game is something that became very standard within the game of Survivor. And there were a lot of people who get voted out and they're not ready to be done playing Survivor. And they want to go to Ponderosa and they want to politic the hell out of the entire situation. And that is something that I am overtly against. Overtly. I think Ponderosa campaigning is one of the silliest, most pathetic things that somebody can do. It's like, dude, your game is done. Your time is done. If you want to go and say, I'm voting for this person and that's why, that's totally cool with me. I have no issue for that. My issue is when someone says, I think I'm going to vote for this person instead. And they go, no, 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 no. You shouldn't vote for that person. And here's why. I that has always rubbed me the wrong way. Because it's like, dude, you lost. And don't try and tell me who I should vote for. The vote is the vote. And that's what it is. They're going to make their case for themselves when we get to Final Tribal. I don't need you to sit here and be their lawyer and relitigate their game to me at Ponderosa so that you can feel like you still have an influence on this game beyond your individual Final Tribal Council vote. And I am so unbelievably, unfathomably lucky that 47 was pretty much devoid of that. There was a little, like a tiny little sliver of subtle campaigning, but by and large, there was pretty much no politicking. There was no campaigning. It was just, hey, present the information that you have from the game. If you want, tell me who you plan on voting for, and we leave it at that. There's no arguing. There's no debating. It's just like, here's what I think, and here's what I'm doing. If you want to take that information into consideration for your vote, go ahead and do that. And if you don't, more power to you. And that was the way that the jury part of 47's Ponderosa went. And I am so unbelievably grateful for that. I can't tell you how unbearable it would have been to have somebody running around Ponderosa trying to be a campaign manager for one of the final three. It would have been unbearable. I would have said something. Thankfully, I didn't have to. And so but that is not to say that it doesn't happen, and it doesn't happen often. And if you are a finalist in Survivor, you should absolutely be trying to send people back to Ponderosa with the intention of them campaigning for you, with the intention of them trying to convince people that aren't on your side to be on your side before you speak a word at Final Tribal Council. You should be trying to do that because there are many people in this world and many people who have played this game who are very malleable to that. And we've seen a lot more of that happen as the show has grown older and evolved more. Here's an interesting take that I want to circle back to what we were talking about in the beginning. My guy, Daryl Seymour, always very active in the comments section. Go ahead. Leave comments, questions, concerns in the comments section. I love to leave some time at the end to get to them. If you're watching on Twitter, if you're watching on YouTube, you can go ahead, join us in the comments section, join the conversation. Juries used to be really bitter in the early years of Survivor. They viewed it less as a game and more of a community working together to survive. Yes, that's a great point. This idea of we're not here to play this game. Like the point is that we're all surviving in the jungle together. And then like part of the show is we have to vote each other out and go do these challenges. But like the priority here is we're all living in the jungle together. So if you're a bad jungle mate, if you're bad at tending the fire, if you're bad at collecting food, if you're bad at going out and getting firewood, like that is all the more reason to vote you out. That don't exist anymore. Maybe for those first couple votes, if you're really bad around camp, that can burn you if you go to tribal early. But people come up with their opinions in 24 hours. If you go out and you work really hard around camp for 24 to like 36 hours, you're a hard worker now. You're somebody that people will look at and say like, oh, they're contributing around here. Because after that time passes, now the game has started. Now somebody somewhere has been voted out. You guys have won or lost immunity. You guys have been to that challenge and you got a taste of it now. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, you know, forget camp, forget the fire. Like I just saw somebody get voted out. I don't want that to be me. I'm going to spend all the waking time that I have that isn't at a challenge trying to make sure that if we do go to tribal again, I'm not going to be that person. And as long as the fire's going and as long as we got a pile of coconuts to eat, like I'm not worried about that. It's a very old school way of thinking to think like, "Oh, this person didn't really make my physical life more comfortable out there, so they gotta go. This person was lazy around camp, so they gotta go." Like, that's dead. That doesn't exist anymore. You got 24 hours where you really gotta make it clear you are a team player, you are willing to help out around camp, you will go get firewood, you will go collect coconuts, you will help build the shelter, you'll go out fishing once or twice. But once that first person goes and everybody is snapped into the reality of what's going on here, all of that goes to the back seat, and it's something you do in the background, and the priority becomes very, very clear, which is make sure that I am set up to go to tribal council and not go home. And so when you're looking at how to manage a jury, right, the philosophy of managing a jury, it is a very complicated thing because it varies so much from season to season and even player to player. But I think a good rule of thumb, broad rules of thumb, is making sure people understand why you voted them out. Making sure that's clear, right? Whether it's because they were a big threat, whether it's because they were operating an alliance that was fighting against yours, whether it's because they just had plans that didn't coincide with yours. People don't have to like the fact that you voted them out, but they need to understand why. They need to be able to go back to Ponderosa with some sense of closure from their time in Fiji. Because without that, you get very bitter. You start assuming the worst. You start playing the blame game. You start pointing fingers. You start thinking that people are out to get you in the worst kind of way, or we're out to get you in the worst kind of way. And that's a tough place to find yourself in. But if somebody leaves Ponderosa and they're like, okay, this person just voted me out because of X, Y, and Z, and I believe them and I can understand that, then you go back to Ponderosa and you say, you know what? They voted me out for that reason. Hell, I probably would have voted me out too if I was in their position. And instead of trying to answer all of these unanswerable questions while you're at Ponderosa before you get to final tribal and you get to speak to whoever voted you out again, assuming in this case they're a finalist, you can start to talk more about the merits of their game and why they would deserve your vote or why they wouldn't. So being able to take away that anxiety and that confusion of why did I get voted out? If you can curb that, especially before someone gets voted out, most people do it at Final Tribal. If you can send someone to Ponderosa and they have no doubt in their mind why they're sitting at Ponderosa, that's a very powerful thing to do as a jury manager. And, obviously, this is something that's stayed consistent throughout the entire history of Survivor is like maintain positive relationships. Don't be a dick. To this day, it's very difficult to win Survivor and be a dick. And that's something that will never change because nobody wants to give a dick $1 million, even if they outplayed you. You have to look no further than Russell Hantz to understand that. The dude who probably has played one of, if not the best finale game without winning. And he didn't deserve to win. And people like to do these big think pieces on like how Russell is actually a bad strategist and blah blah blah. And Russell's actually not good at Survivor. Like, no, okay, we can all be honest here. And I'm not fanboying because I probably wouldn't vote for Russell to win either if I was on either of those seasons. But like the dude is objectively good at Survivor. The dude is objectively good at finding idols. The dude is objectively good at whipping votes and directing those votes to get out whoever he's targeting. Like we have twos in maybe not anymore now that the film is out on him. But in his prime, like, yes, he was one of, if not the best of all time at doing that. We don't need to overcomplicate the Russell Hands dilemma. He's just a dick, and you don't wanna give a dick $1,000,000, no matter how good he was at the game. So another big part of jury management, which is something that is consistently true throughout the history of the show, is be nice to people. And there is a way that you can play a game based on betrayal and cutting throats and lying. There is a nice way to do that. There is a way for people to walk out the game and be like, damn, Gabe voted me out, but like he is a cool dude. He was always nice to me. I had pleasant conversations with him. He made me feel comfortable when I was around him. And when it came to the gameplay thing, he did something I really didn't like, which was voting me out. But when I think about Gabe, I'm not gonna be like, he's a fucking asshole. Fuck Gabe. No, it's like, oh, he was a cool dude. And I would say the same exact thing about all three of the finalists for 47. Like they were all genuinely warm, welcoming, open minded, nice, down to earth people. And that's why voting for any of them would have been easy. And it's also why voting for any of them was very difficult because it was hard to pick. And so if you can send people to Ponderosa with a clear understanding of why they went home, and you can do it in a way that is maintaining a kind and open and welcoming and warm relationship with them, you're putting yourself in a very good position. You're putting yourself in a great place. And that keeps these lines of communication open. Now when you get to final tribal council, people are excited to hear what you have to say. People are anxious in a good way to learn more and to ask you questions that they've been sitting on for days. The last thing you want is for folks to show up to Final Tribal and just be like, I've been waiting for this. I'm going to give him his. I'm going to cut him down. I've been waiting for this. Like that's a recipe for disaster. And that's what happened with Russell. And we've seen that happen with many, many other players over the course of Survivor. Now, I talked a little bit about my time as a jury member in Survivor. And I think that now that, if we're moving through the evolution of Survivor, we've kind of talked about the old school. It was about how good of a roommate are you? How good of a person in terms of intermediate relationships are you? Not so much the gameplay. And then it evolves a little bit more into, okay, we understand what the game is. You're playing a good game. You voted me out, but I can respect that. That's the first big hump that I think jury evolution needed to take, was the idea of not being angry at somebody just because they voted you out. And then you kind of turn into, okay, how good of a game are you playing? And am I part of your story in some way, whether as an antagonist or as an ally? Could you not be sitting there if it wasn't for my help? Or could you not be sitting there if you kept me in the game? Like, those are things that become very important to people. And now in the new era, I think we find ourselves in a very interesting position because I think that people are in this place where Survivor has become such a big bucket list item for people. And then when they actually make it through the months of casting or years of casting, and they finally make it out there, and then they get deep into the game, and they make it to the merge, and they make it to the jury phase of the game, and maybe they find an idol, and maybe they win some individual immunities, and they're really high on their horse, and then everything comes crashing down. I think we've almost kind of come full circle where people get quite bitter again because of how bucket listy Survivor has been. I think people now are like, this was my life's dream to go on Survivor. And I've been watching literally since I came out of the womb. When I came out of the womb, they had Survivor on the TV and the doctor held me up to the screen and I watched Boston Rob propose to Amber before they cut my umbilical cord off. That's how much Survivor means to me. Like, now that we've gotten to that point, I actually think that we're starting to see more bitter juries once again. Now, 47 and 48, I don't think we're very bitter juries. I think for the most part, particularly 47, both of those seasons voted for the person that deserved it the most. And, we got quite a crazy final tribal vote for 48 with all three people getting votes. But the guy who was supposed to won, right? Now you look at 46, you get quite a messy jury with 46. You look at 43, you get quite a messy jury with 43. You look at 42, you get quite a messy jury with 42. And I think a lot of that, again, was just like people blow up this idea of Survivor, and then I'm on Survivor so big in their heads that when it comes crashing down, the only place they have to turn is bitterness. And I find that to be very interesting. And I think there was a lull in that over the course of the show. And I think it's starting to rear its head once again. Very intrigued to see how that plays out in 50 when you have people from all across the spectrum of the evolution of juries, with the exception, of course, of season 21 through 29. Let's look at some questions here. Starting at 8 o'clock, we have a brand new show gracing the Reality After Show Network. Myself, Johnny Fairplay, and producer Bobby Goodsby. Very excited to show everybody that show and to stick around with you for another hour. What that is, you're going to have to tune in to find out, but it's going to be awesome. That's all I know, is it's going to be great. Let's do some questions real quick before we get out of here. There was one I saw from, I'll tell you what, let's do this real quick. Have you been watching AU versus the World? No, I haven't, because I admittedly, and you can call me a fake Survivor fan for this, I haven't seen any of Australian Survivor. So I am watching Australian Survivor right now. Me, Johnny, and our buddy Wayne, who you may have seen on here sometimes, are doing a recap podcast. We've done one episode. The next one will be coming sometime next week. I'm watching King George's first season. Brains versus Brawn 1. I have to understand what I'm watching before I watch AU versus the World, but I've seen everything that's happening. It's impossible to avoid spoilers, and it looks like it's been awesome. It looks like it's been super fun, and I can't wait to watch it. But I need to do my homework first. I hate going into things that have a bunch of lore and a bunch of history behind them and just dropping in at like the climax of it all and being like, I don't know what's going on. I'll let other people tell me, and then I'll fill in the blanks and have fun. No, I need to know what's going on in its totality. So I'm catching up on the must-watch AU Survivor seasons, and then I'll watch AU versus the World. Not as fun not watching it with everybody, I understand, but it's how I got to do things. Let's do one more question here because we're running up against it. I'll give one to my guy Daryl because he's always here, and he's always active in the comment section, and we love that. Gabe, was your jury set on voting for Rachel before Final Tribal, and did people influence other people to vote for Rachel? Was there anyone there talking up Sam? So I can say this with like a lot of sincerity. It was a super open vote going into Final Tribal. People knew what they were up against. There was no doubt about that. Like, Rachel's numbers spoke for themselves. And we knew that there wasn't going to be a lot for Rachel to say that would change our opinion of her, which was a very high opinion. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. But we were like, I don't think there's a whole lot that Rachel can. There aren't a lot of bombs Rachel can drop at Final Tribal. Where Sam, on the other hand, we had quite a good idea of what Sam's game was, but we also went in being like, give us some more. And he did give us more. And I say this all the time that like Sam won Final Tribal Council. You know, it's just that Rachel came into Final Tribal Council here and Sam came in here. And at the end of Final Tribal, Sam was like here and Rachel was here. Still above him, still warranted the votes. But like Sam had a great Final Tribal Council, and we all went in with a very open mindset. There were maybe a couple people that were pretty dead set on Rachel no matter what, but the large majority of the jury went in with a very open mindset. And which is another thing that I love about our season is that it was just like this very honest, open-minded jury that made for an awesome final tribal council. I'll tell you what, we'll leave it right there. Coming up in about 5 minutes, brand new show, Reality After Show Network. Me, Bobby Goodspeed, Johnny Fairplay, talking about the original reality show, the best reality show. What is it? You'll have to stick around and tune in to find out. Don't go anywhere. My name has been Gabe Ortiz. This is the comeback of Gabe's Big Move after a couple week hiatus. Can't wait to talk to you next week.